And then I came across something that Bandura did with children, where what he did is he had kids that were afraid of being alone and being in the dark. He had them go to an isolated area with a walkie-talkie, and he told them that they have to wait for a phone call from one of their superheroes. So it was like Batman, Superman kind of thing. And they found that the kids who were engaged in this sort of fantasy role play of the superhero needing their help, and they had to just wait for the phone call, that they engaged in the noxious stimuli longer. And as you know, with exposure, the longer you're exposed to the thing that you're afraid of, the faster it goes away. You have an extinction that occurs. So taking all of this nerd talk and saying, okay, how do you put it into sport play? I think, well, let's go back a step into the nerd world. There's a guy named Richard Swin who came up with a theory called anxiety management training. And what he theorized was, he had two, anxiety management training and anger management training. What he theorized was, if you can't get into the scenario or unpack the trauma, all you have to do is have people tune into the physiological sensation. So instead of asking them, what are you angry about? You just say, I know I'm angry because I'm clenching my teeth. And rather going like, well, what are you angry about? Let's unpack that. It's like, okay, you recognize the physiological cue. Now you got to let it go and turn it off again. Relaxation kind of stuff. What's interesting was he originally called it a competence, anxiety competence training instead of management. And what he came up with as a concept, Swin, was if people were competent, they could use the competent experience to make them to use as an incompatible response. So in other words, it's like, man, I have all this self-talk, I'm a loser, and I'm anxious about failing this, game or business transaction. And he would say, well, think about the last time you were successful. You really crushed it. Now use that kind of thing. What's interesting was Swin eliminated that because he was working with chronic patients, and his concern was chronic patients might not have too many successful experiences to come up with. And I was like, well, but most athletes have at least one or two moments, especially when you're working at the elite space. They've had many. So one of the things, sorry, it's such a long answer to such a brilliant question. So what do I simply do? When someone has all this doubt, and again, they've got this critical incident, I go, okay, tell me about the physiology of that moment. What did it feel like? How do you feel when you think about it? What kind of comes up? And they'll talk about bile in their mouth or their stomach drops and all that. And I go, okay, good. Hold that sensation. Hold it, study it, understand it. Now, let it go. Let me know when it fades away. Okay. Now, tell me a time where you were supremely successful, where everything just felt right and good. Now, what did that physiological sensation feel like? Hold that. Study it. Now, let's go back and forth between those two for a bit. So hold it, study it, let it go. Hold it, study it, let it go. Once you feel like you can kind of induce both states, the same way like I want you to think about a lemon and it makes you salivate. Once you can induce both physiological states, I want you to turn on the anxiety state. Once you got it, now use the confident state to turn off the anxiety one. And what I'll do is, again, I'm super low tech. I'm just like, raise your hand. Once you've got that anxiety state, raise your hand. Great. Now use the confident state, feeling state, belief state, and memory to turn it off. And when the anxiety is gone, just lower your hand.
How long does that take to get them to that stage?
So
or is it completely independent in the person?
So when I engaged in it scientifically, the mode was one session. It was amazing because once the extinction occurred, it was it. That was it. They were good.
Would that be because it's so quick? Because they're almost, and I know you were talking about mindfulness, but just bringing their attention to those two all different states, they hadn't brought the awareness to both at the same time or intermittently. And it was the fact that they were living in, whether it was this high anxiety, huge fear state for so long, they just hadn't addressed or hadn't even acknowledged that confidence state? Because I think it's really easy to just allow confidence to kind of just happen and go, and you don't actually acknowledge what got you there, how it felt. I don't think athletes do that enough. I think it's when you're riding high, it's really easy to get back home, get on the bus, do whatever, and just kind of move on from that game and go, well, the next game's going to be brilliant. It's going to be awesome. But reality, you haven't actually engaged in, well, how do I feel? What's going on? What's everything that I'm saying to myself? All that side of it.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So again, mode was one, but mean was like anywhere between 4 to 8 sessions of the experience. What was interesting was I did a 3-month, 6-month, and 1-year follow-up, and it didn't return.
It didn't return?
It did not return.
That's wild.
Totally.
Hey, if you've enjoyed that video, then you can click right here to watch the full unedited version of that episode. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this channel by clicking the button below. I'll see you soon.